Story recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a horror and thriller film called Do Not Reply. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. Chelsea receives a video call from her best friend Mia, who's been exchanging explicit photos with Dylan, a boy she likes. Chelsea worries that Dylan might show her photos to his friends, so Mia considers sending Dylan's photos to her in case he does her dirty. However, Chelsea wants nothing to do with it and insists that she needs to head to school. When Chelsea gets downstairs, she finds her mother already decorating for Halloween while her sister, Christina, is occupied with a phone call. Seeing this, Chelsea asks her mom if she could drive her to school because she doesn't want to get associated with her sister and her stuck-up elitist friends. However, her mom refuses and tells Chelsea to get along with her sister. After this, Christina drops the call and teases Chelsea when she notices that she's texting an anonymous boy named VR Cowboy. Chelsea refuses to discuss it and urges her sister to go. At school, Chelsea keeps on receiving texts from VR Cowboy, but she ignores him. She spots Mia talking to Dylan and Seth, and after they leave, Mia reveals that Dylan invited them to his house tonight. Despite Chelsea's hesitation, Mia asks her to keep Seth occupied while she and Dylan get busy. Although she hates the idea, Chelsea goes with Mia that evening. Mia ditches her for Dylan, leaving her in the living room with Seth. Once they're alone, Seth suddenly kisses her and places her hand on his crotch, but she quickly pulls away. The next day at school, Chelsea tells Mia that she ran home because of Seth's advances. Suddenly, Dylan shows up and starts making out with Mia, which leaves Chelsea no choice but to reply to VR Cowboy. VR Cowboy introduces himself as Brad and starts to flirt with her. However, the security guard appears and confiscates her phone. After school, Chelsea's mom picks her up and reprimands her for getting into trouble again. She punishes her by taking away her phone for a month. Because of this, Chelsea relentlessly tries to keep herself entertained without a phone at home. Fortunately, Mia visits her and hands her a spare phone. However, she discovers that Mia only did this because she used her as an alibi to go and see Dylan. This angers Chelsea, claiming that Mia now only cares about Dylan. Offended, Mia leaves. Chelsea logs into her account and continues her conversation with Brad. She rambles about how her life sucks and she has no one to talk to. Brad tells her that he'll listen to her, so they should get to know each other. He talks about Chelsea's profile, where she claimed to be a cheerleader. To maintain her fake image, Chelsea enters Christina's room and takes pictures in her cheerleading uniform. Then she sends the photos to Brad, leading them to a video call. However, his face is blurry and he explains that his phone camera is broken. 3 weeks later, Chelsea forms a deeper connection with Brad, so she suggests dating in real life, and Brad agrees. Just then, Chelsea hears a girl on his end, and he seems irritated at her. When she asks, Brad explains that it's Sadie, his sister. Continuing with their plans, Brad recommends meeting at a warehouse Halloween party, where she can dress as a zombie cheerleader and he'll be a zombie quarterback. Chelsea finds this fun, so she agrees. Halloween arrives and Chelsea tells her mother that she'll just stay home and pass candy along to trick-or-treaters. However, after everyone leaves, Chelsea goes to the venue and immediately meets Brad, whose face is covered in makeup and a football helmet. He hands her some alcohol and insists on finishing the whole bottle before they head out, so they don't get caught. Although she hesitates, Chelsea chugs the whole bottle and begins to feel hazy. With her being drunk, Brad leads her to his car, where he ties her up and covers her in the back seat. Before driving off, he destroys Chelsea's phone. Soon, Chelsea wakes up chained in an eerie basement. Eventually, Brad arrives with her food and unties her hands. The next day, he enters the basement again and addresses Chelsea as Sadie. When Chelsea corrects him, he slaps her, insisting that she's Sadie now. Before leaving, he flips her plate over and the food splatters on the ground. Chelsea is too stunned to speak, so she keeps quiet until Brad leaves. Later, she finds comfort in the presence of a rat that eats her spilled food. When the rat leaves, Chelsea cries because it was the only thing that made her feel less alone. Later, Brad teases her with some water and she immediately drinks it. She assumes that he'll feed her too, but Brad asks her what her name is before giving the food. Sarcastically, Chelsea replies that she's Sadie. Brad is displeased with her attitude, so he drops the food in the dirt, which Chelsea eats anyway. As Brad leaves, he spots rat dung around, so Chelsea later wakes up to a rat trap capturing the rodent. She mourns for the creature as it dies, along with her hope. Eventually, someone turns the lights on and another cheerleader appears, introducing herself as Sadie. However, her real name is Megan. Megan unlocks her chains according to Brad's command, so Chelsea frantically escapes the basement but
So, you've turned your gardening skills into a budding small business. Now what? Let Constant Contact help you take your business forward. Attract the right people through
can't open the doors and windows. Megan eventually catches up to her and pins Chelsea to the wall, telling her to behave or they'll get into trouble. When she calms down, Megan orders her to rake the carpet to remove their footprints because everything must always be perfect and clean. Chelsea does as she's told until she spots Brad upstairs in his office working on his computer. After this, Megan leads Chelsea into another room where they meet another cheerleader, Heather, who introduces herself as another Sadie. Heather asks for Chelsea's real name and she remains firm and says it's Sadie, pleasing them. Afterward, Heather leaves to bake a cake for Brad. With that, Megan commands Chelsea to strip down and clean herself up. When Chelsea asks for some privacy, she gets mad and forces her to get in the tub. After cleaning her up, Megan informs her that her hair needs to be bleached according to Brad's preference. During this, Brad puts on a headgear filled with cameras and starts waving around a knife as if stabbing someone with it. After getting her hair bleached, Chelsea hears crying and finds an injured Tina in the room opposite hers. Chelsea tries to help her, but she suddenly accuses her of backstabbing her. Meanwhile, Brad leaves his office and gets a piercing headache, leading him to recall the real Sadie, who showed him her body while laughing at him. After snapping out of it, he goes to the kitchen and finds Heather baking a cake. He creeps up behind her and begins to touch her, asking if that's what she wants. With no choice, Heather says yes and he slams her head on the table. Shortly after, Heather goes to Chelsea's room, now with a bruise on her cheek. She helps her prepare for dinner, but Chelsea freaks out about how Tina needs a doctor. However, Heather insists that Brad would never take her to a hospital, so they have to nurse her back to health themselves. This angers Chelsea, asking if they've ever tried to get out, but Heather warns her that she already saw what happens if they try. Instead, Heather helps Chelsea put on makeup and tells her that they'll be able to have outside time. True enough, Brad allows Chelsea to have outside time, but this is only through a VR headpiece to give her the illusion of the outside world. Brad then ends their outside time and tells them to go to dinner. Before they do, Heather whispers to Chelsea that she should save some food for Tina because the leftovers are all she gets to eat. When Chelsea begins eating without Brad, she almost gets punished for it. The tension makes Chelsea cry, so she utters that she misses her mom. This prompts Brad to tell her that her dad was sent home early by the army to help look for her. He then congratulates Chelsea for finally gaining more attention than Christina. Hearing this makes Chelsea sob, but Brad gets angry, forcing her to compose herself. After dinner, Chelsea finds Heather packing her things. She says that she's been held captive for 3 years, but now that Brad thinks she's perfect, she's free to go. Suddenly, Brad appears to pick up Heather, saying that it's time for her final performance. After this, Chelsea feeds Tina and finally recognizes her as a missing girl she saw in the news. Downstairs, Brad prepares for Heather's final performance but gets another headache. This reminds him of when Sadie was born, and his mother immediately favored his younger sister over him. Because of this, he said he would.
I told you, meat is frozen. Pasta already ready, love. Baby, it's already out. Trust me on the pasta. You want a taco? Do you want an apple? Put pasta on the on meat on the cooker now. It's getting there. Here, try it on the apple. Alright, guys, I'm back. Alright, it's
Wished
cooking.
she was never born, so his mother slapped him and sent him to the basement. Brad finally returns to reality and tells Heather that her final performance will be quite different. However, he promises to set her free if she finishes it. They enter the basement and Heather warms up while Brad puts on the VR headpiece he made. When he tells Heather to start performing a cheer dance, she stops upon finding Brad holding a knife. Frightened, she tries to escape, but he cuts her in the arm. Heather argues that Brad thought she was perfect, and he agrees, but that was also why his mother always hated him. Because of this, Heather screams at him, saying she's not his sister. However, Brad gets mad and stabs her in the stomach. Still, Heather tries to fight back, but Brad overpowers her. She tries to escape again, but Brad corners her and stabs her again, saying that she always tried to hurt him. Finally, he cuts her throat and says that he'll watch her die over and over. After this, Brad goes to Chelsea's room and finds her sleeping. He hovers his hand over her body but can't bring himself to touch her. Instead, he places his head on Chelsea's chest and cries, waking her up. Chelsea freezes in fear as he stays over her, but he suddenly hears Sadie's voice in his head, so he leaves. Chelsea then covers herself with a blanket and shivers in terror. The following day, Megan talks to Chelsea through a hole in the wall between the rooms. Chelsea realizes that she has Stockholm Syndrome as Megan tells her to stay away from Brad because he's hers. Although Brad beats her sometimes, she still loves him nonetheless. At breakfast, Chelsea purposely uses all the ketchup. Brad gets mad at this, so he takes her food and tells her not to eat. This makes Megan laugh, but Brad gets annoyed by her, so he punishes them both by not letting them have any outside time for the day. Later on, Chelsea talks with Tina and discovers that Brad impregnated her. This was why she tried to escape, but Brad caught her. He beat her up and stabbed her leg, which caused her miscarriage. Just then, Tina pleads with Chelsea to help kill herself through an overdose. She refuses and changes the girl's bandages instead. However, Chelsea realizes that Tina's wound is infected, making Tina hopeless about making it out alive. Finally, Chelsea agrees to help her in exchange for information on how to escape. Later that day, Chelsea cleans the living room and finds a picture of the real Sadie. However, Brad suddenly snatches it and warns her never to touch it again. After this, Chelsea goes back to her room. Suddenly, Tina calls her and says that Brad is mowing the backyard, so she should get the pills from his nightstand. Since their doors are locked, Tina instructs Chelsea on how to open them. When she succeeds, she immediately leaves and heads to Brad's room. There, Chelsea finds the pills along with Heather's necklace. Just then, she remembers to rake the carpet to remove her footprints. Finally, Chelsea reaches Tina's room but stops to go to Brad's office to ask for help through the internet. This proves useless and she can't get through without a password. Chelsea quickly leaves and tries to return while erasing her footprints on the carpet. Meanwhile, Brad finishes mowing and enters through the front door. Upstairs, Chelsea accidentally spills the pills on the floor, so she frantically picks them up and returns to Tina's room. However, Brad hears when she puts the lock back on, so he opens the door while Chelsea hides in their shared bathroom. Tina panics upon seeing him, so he gets annoyed and attempts to kill her. However, Chelsea enters the room and pleads with Brad to stop, so he chokes her. Seeing Tina crying, Chelsea asks Brad to let her kill the girl. Brad gets surprised, but he agrees as it'll be interesting to watch. When Chelsea approaches, Tina tells her that she's thankful it won't be Brad who kills her. With that, Chelsea stuffs a pillow on the girl's face, suffocating her to death. Brad gets amazed by this and immediately comforts Chelsea, who's panicking over what she's done. Realizing that he and Chelsea think alike, Brad trusts her enough to show her his work. He takes Chelsea to his office and shows her the video of Heather's death. She gets horrified by it, but acts thrilled to please Brad. Brad asks her how she should kill Megan, so she recommends that she should beat her to death. He's fascinated by the idea and wants to do it immediately, making Chelsea panic. Hoping to save Megan, she distracts Brad by seducing him. She tells him that he's perfect, which flatters Brad, making him fall in love with her. After this, he takes Chelsea to his room to make love. Afterward, he escorts her back to her room to let her sleep. Finally alone, Chelsea breaks down and cries herself to sleep. The next day, Chelsea tries to kill herself with the painkillers, which only leads to her throwing up. During breakfast, Brad keeps staring at her, which Megan notices. He then talks about testing a new VR camera, and Megan immediately volunteers. After this, Chelsea stands up to clean the table, and Brad caresses her arm. Megan sees this, so she intentionally bumps Chelsea in the kitchen. This stirs up a fight, so Brad tells Chelsea to take Megan to her room. Finally alone, Chelsea tells Megan that Brad is about to kill her. To prove this, she shows her Tina's corpse and adds that Brad killed Heather too. However, Megan is too blinded by her adoration, so she runs downstairs and rats her out to Brad. Brad gets mad, realizing that he can't trust any of them. He drags them back to their rooms and locks them in. Once Brad is away, Chelsea talks to Megan through the hole on the wall. She insists on working together before they get killed, but Megan still believes that Brad is innocent. Meanwhile, Brad goes to the basement to test his cameras. While he's out, Chelsea escapes through Tina's room and heads to Megan's to free her. Together, they go to Brad's office where Chelsea shows the footage of Heather's death. As Megan squirms at what she sees, Chelsea rummages through the drawers to find anything useful. However, she doesn't realize that Brad is already standing by the door. Suddenly, he yanks Megan back to her room. Then he ties Chelsea up and drags her to the basement. Meanwhile, Megan cries as she listens to Chelsea's screams. Finally, she decides to help, so she breaks down their wall and escapes through Tina's room. In the basement, Brad is hurt upon realizing that everything Chelsea said was a lie. Because of this, he puts on his camera headpiece and prepares to kill her. Before he could do so, he experiences another headache and recalls his past. Years ago, Brad killed their mother so he could be with Sadie forever. However, Sadie killed herself to avoid staying with him. Meanwhile, Megan is in the kitchen, trying to open a locked drawer that contains the knives. When she finally gets it done, she grabs the biggest one and goes to save Chelsea. In the basement, Brad beats up Chelsea, just as she suggested last night. Chelsea fights back and throws a rock at him. Suddenly, Megan appears and tries to stab Brad, but he easily beats her up. After this, he attacks Chelsea again, but Megan gets up and stabs him in the back. Brad falls to the ground, allowing the girls to beat him up. With him weakened and injured, the girls take his keys and head to the front door. However, as they try to open it, Brad escapes and grabs Megan, choking her. Chelsea then takes the camera headgear and smashes Brad's face with it. The girls finally open the door and escape to the outside world. There, they ask for help from passerby and finally get to call their families. Months later, Chelsea goes to therapy, though she doesn't open up to her therapist, since she refuses to relive what happened to her. Meanwhile, Brad is at an asylum where a bloody image of Sadie haunts him. Elsewhere, two 13-year-old girls agree to meet up with a stranger online. Thus, the string of crimes continues.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications.
Welcome to Movie Recall. In today's video, we will be going through the 2021 thriller movie Girl in the Basement. It's time to recall. Let's get started. Turn on subtitles and spoilers ahead. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos like these. In the middle of the night, Sarah and her father Don rush Marie to the hospital. Marie sits at the back of the car as she struggles to breathe while Sarah holds her. All of a sudden, Marie stops breathing, and Sarah immediately demands her father to drive faster. Once they reach the hospital, Don carries Marie and tells Sarah not to say a word to anyone before finally going inside. The doctors and nurses take Marie away, while Sarah and Don are left in the corridor to wait. 20 years ago, during a family dinner, Sarah Cody tells her father that she's going to be late for a party. This takes Don aback since he didn't know that Sarah had plans to go to a party, so he asks his wife Irene about this. Irene says she was going to tell him but didn't get around to it. Sarah assures him it's no big deal since it's only a party, but her father disagrees, asserting the big deal is her attitude. He grabs Sarah's hand and forces her to sit while he turns to her mother, claiming that she already allowed her weeks ago. However, Irene could only apologetically tell Sarah to listen to her father. Sarah's sister Amy offers to take her to the party, but Don tells her to stay out of it. He forbids his daughter from going out to the party before demanding her to stay in her room. As soon as everyone is asleep, Sarah sneaks out of the house and meets her boyfriend Chris, who is waiting for her outside. The two leave on Chris's motorcycle. While back at home, Irene knocks on Sarah's door, asking her daughter to talk to her. As Irene continues to knock, Don gets mad and starts banging on the door, demanding her to open it. Irene tries to reason that Sarah probably just wants some alone time, but he ignores her and unlocks the door anyway. Inside, they find Sarah's bed empty and the window open. Disappointed, Don says Sarah is a problem before leaving the room. At the outdoor party, Sarah and Chris are having a good time dancing. Meanwhile, Don is fuming at home, looking out the window now and then to check if Sarah's back. Chris then takes Sarah away from the crowd to a quieter spot. As they sit on the grass, Chris sings his girlfriend a song before finally telling her that he loves her, to which she responds that she loves him too. Sarah goes home the following morning, and as Don waits for her by the porch, he sees Sarah kissing Chris before saying goodbye to each other. He then sees his daughter walk to the house, but not toward the front door. Don calls her attention, telling her to come in the front door like a normal person, adding that she can't make up her own rules. Ignoring her father, Sarah tries to walk past him, but Don blocks her path, saying they're not done yet. Don asks her if Chris is her boyfriend, but Sarah curtly tells him that it's none of his business. When Don asks her if they've given her permission to date motorcycle boys, Sarah gets pissed and promises her father that she'll be out of the house once she turns 18 and that he won't see her again. Feeling disrespected, Don gently pins Sarah against the door, reminding her that while she's in his house, she has to follow his rules. Sarah tells her father to get off her, and just in time, her mother comes down from the stairs to ask them what's going on. Sarah breaks free from her father's grasp, and as she goes upstairs and past her mother, she tells Irene that her father is crazy. While in bed, Amy talks to Sarah about her sneaking out and hopes that it was worth it. Sarah says it was, adding that Chris said he loved her. They giggle like little girls, and Amy reminds her that she'll be out of their house in no time. She just needs to keep her head down and be cool. In a hushed voice, Sarah says somebody needs to stand up to Don. She calls him crazy and complains that her mother is just letting him walk all over her. Despite what Sarah just said, Amy warns her not to mess with him. Then Sarah's mother enters her room to let her know that she's grounded for a week. Annoyed, Sarah swears again that she's leaving as soon as she turns 18. Meanwhile, her father stands outside her door listening to their conversation. When asked if she has a plan, Sarah says she intends to travel the world and start in Florida, getting jobs that will help her work her way across the country. Her mother supports her, but she also reminds Sarah not to be reckless. Unhappy with what he just heard, Don goes down to the basement and sits down to think. Then he walks up to the bookshelf and starts pushing it, revealing a door to a secret room.
Will you choose the warrior, the mage, or the hunter? Well, in Albion Online, you don't have to choose. There are no classes.
3 months later, after Sarah has graduated, she talks to Chris on the phone about her plans. When Irene asks where her father is, she says he's out front. Her mother says that it's good for him and that she's worried that he's been spending too much time in the basement lately. Irene then leaves, and when he's sure his wife is gone, Don tells Sarah to hang up the phone and help him with something. Sarah apologizes to Chris and hangs up before assisting her father with carrying a big box down to the basement. Down there, Don pushes the bookshelf aside and Sarah is surprised to see the secret room. She asks him what the room is for, and Don explains that the previous owner has built that bomb shelter and he later added some improvements. After bringing the box inside the bomb shelter, Don asks his daughter what she thinks of it. She says it's not nice since there are no windows, and Don only tells her that that's too bad before locking her inside. Sarah bangs on the door and yells, pleading with her father to let her out, but Don ignores her and leaves. Scared, Sarah takes a look around the room, which only has a sink and a shower head. Sarah opens the box they carried and finds her clothes and other belongings inside. Once again, she tries calling for help while her father pushes the bookshelf back to its place, hiding the secret door. After failing to guess the door's security code 3 times, the lights go out and Sarah's left to use the flashlight inside her box. She tries looking for anything that might be useful to her, and she ends up spotting the vent. Sarah goes near it, screaming for her mother, but Don is already on the other side of the vent. He covers it to make sure that no one will hear her. Finally satisfied, Don goes back upstairs. As darkness falls, Irene gets worried since Sarah isn't home yet. Amy says that Sarah is probably just at her friend's house, but Irene is still worried and says she'll call the cops. Don then tells her that Sarah will probably be home the following morning, but his wife is determined to call the police. As she leaves the room, Irene instructs Amy to contact Chris while Don sits down there pretending not to know anything. Days pass and Sarah remains in the bomb shelter. With nothing else to do, she either paces around the room or tries unlocking the door's code until the lights go out. On the 4th day, her father finally decides to visit her, so Sarah hides behind a pillar. As soon as he gets inside, she pushes him out of the way and gets out of the door, only to be trapped outside the second door. She screams for her mother, but her father tells her that no matter how loud she screams, no one will hear her. Don then grabs Sarah by the hair and drags her back inside the bomb shelter. She's adamant that he can't do this to her, adding that there's no air so she can't breathe. Don explains that as long as there's power, there's air. 3 failed attempts on the keypad will shut the power off, including the ventilation system. When he reveals that he changes the code every day, Sarah steps back away from him, asking why he's doing this to her. Don only tells her that this is the consequence of her being disrespectful and that everything she gets, she will earn. He asks her if she understands him, and when Sarah doesn't answer, he slaps her and pins her to the door before forcing himself on her. Outside the door, Don watches his daughter slowly get up from the floor, only to throw up. With that, he takes his leave. Irene talks to a cop and tells him that it's unlike their daughter to just run off. The cop says that since Sarah is already 18, 18, she can come and go as she pleases. He then asks Sarah's parents if she might just be staying at a friend's house, and Irene tearfully replies that she doesn't have many friends. The officer asks if she's got a boyfriend, and Amy tells him that Chris hasn't seen Sarah either. Wanting to know who Chris is, the officer asks for his number, and Amy leaves the room to get it. After a few more questions, Don tells the officer that Sarah's bag and some of her clothes are missing. He also asks Irene if she mentioned Sarah's plan to the officer, so Irene tells the officer about her daughter's plan to travel, starting from Florida. Sobbing, Irene insists that Sarah wouldn't leave without saying goodbye to her, and that she hasn't even had her birthday yet. The officer then informs them that they've already filed a missing persons report, but since they have no leads, that's all he can do at this point. In the bomb shelter, Sarah gets more frustrated as days pass. Demoralized, Sarah could only think of her boy.
Let me check on the box.
Boyfriend and their plan to go to Florida. One day while Don is mowing the lawn, Chris shows up to their house looking for Sarah, saying the cops called him and that he has something for her. Don makes up a story about Sarah running off with a guy named Steve. He explains that Sarah and Steve are childhood friends and that she's always talked about running off with him as soon as she graduates. Don says that according to his wife, the two are in Florida and Sarah is working as a waitress. Upset, Chris prepares to leave, and as he does, Don pretends to sympathize with him. On her 21st day in captivity, Don brings Sarah a foldable chair and a small cake for her 18th birthday. He gives Sarah a red dress and asks her to put it on. Once she's done, Don tells her to pick something she wants, and when she says she wants to get out, he tells her that it's too early for that. When she asks for television, he says she needs to earn that, so Sarah asks for a clock instead, and he agrees. He then tells Sarah to come near him, and when she calls him Dad, he instructs her to call him Don. Sarah walks towards her father, and later on, she gets a clock. On the 38th day, she receives some canned goods, and this gives her the idea of making a weapon out of the small tin can. When her father arrives, Sarah is already in her red dress, and with a makeshift weapon in her hand behind her back, she tries attacking her father, but Don is too quick, and he disarms her with ease. He throws Sarah against the wall, and as she hits the floor, Don brutally steps on her arm. The sick and twisted man forces himself on Sarah once more under the guise of teaching her a lesson. A year has gone by and Don gets Sarah pregnant. As she cleans one day, her water suddenly bursts, and with the help of the pregnancy book she has, Sarah gives birth to her first child alone. She calls her child Marie, and when Don learns that Sarah has already given birth, he tells her that motherhood will provide her with a sense of purpose. Marie stays with Sarah in the basement, and in her 4th year in captivity, Sarah gets pregnant again. Worried about having another baby, Sarah tries to ask Don if he can finally let them out, but he only gets furious with her. Pissed, Don leaves and joins Irene and Amy upstairs for dinner. Amy congratulates her father for his recent promotion, and when Irene asks if they could hire a private investigator since Don is getting a raise, he tells her no. Don says Irene has already spent $5,000 by going to Florida to find Sarah, and they're not going to waste any more money. Irene says that she'll never stop searching for her daughter, not caring how much it costs them. This upsets Don, saying they have another daughter as he points to Amy. That night, Don brings Sarah and Marie a television as a Christmas present. In her 7th year in captivity, when Sarah has already given birth to their second child, Sarah asks Don to bring some medicine for Marie. However, Don gives the kind that is for adults, upsetting her. She tells Don that they're the wrong kind and that they could poison her daughter. Unbothered, Don tells her that she and Amy got sick all the time, but their mother managed to handle it. He adds that since she's the mother now, she needs to take care of it. Sarah insists that Marie needs a doctor, but Don ignores her and leaves. To put Marie to sleep, Sarah tells her a story and sings her the song Chris has made for her. One day, Chris visits Sarah's house hoping to hear anything from her. He sees Amy, who's staying at her parents' house for the weekend, and asks if there's any news about Sarah. When she replies that they still haven't heard from her, Chris mentions Steve, which confuses Amy. Chris tells her that her father has told him about Steve and Sarah, which only confuses her even more, wondering when the two men have talked to each other. Pregnant for the third time, Sarah tells Marie to refrain from singing. Marie tells her that she wants to go outside with Don, and when Sarah tells her she can't, she rudely talks back to her, making Sarah put her on timeout. Meanwhile, Chris learns from Amy that Don was lying about Steve and Sarah, realizing that it's just a made-up story. When he asks Amy what she thinks really happened to Sarah, she says that she imagines her sister happily living somewhere, but Amy admits that sometimes she thinks her father has done something to her. Amy mentions that one time her father hit her mother, and Irene was in the hospital for 2 days. After learning about Don's lie, Irene confronts her husband, asking him why he lied to Chris. He arrogantly tells her that it doesn't make any difference if he lies to some lowlife like him who's been sneaking around with Sarah. Unable to control herself, Amy asks him if he did something to Sarah, but Don says that all he's ever done is to provide for them. Irene is fed up at this point, and she tells her husband that she will hire a private investigator and that she doesn't care what he'll say. Irene storms off, and when Don follows her, Amy notices the keys he left on the sofa. She takes them and goes down into the basement where, just in the bomb shelter behind the bookshelf, her sister is going into labor. As Amy searches the basement, Don shows up and asks for his keys back before angrily sending her away. For the third time, Sarah gives birth, and when Don arrives and asks for the child's name, she says they're calling him Thomas. Sarah gives Don a message, and as she does, she suggests that he should take Thomas upstairs since there isn't enough room for the three of them down there. She tries sweet-talking her father, convincing him that if Thomas stays with them up there, she'll have more time to take care of Don. Realizing that Sarah is okay, Don leaves Thomas on their porch with a note from Sarah saying that she hopes she'll take care of their son Thomas. As Irene lifts the baby, she doesn't notice that there's a smaller note in the bassinet. She calls Don, who pretends to be clueless, and tells him that the baby is Sarah's. As Irene takes Thomas inside, Don finds the note and reads it. He goes to the basement and tells Sarah that he's found her message that's supposed to inform her mother that she's being held captive in the basement. Don throws the small piece of paper on her face.
Mobile games are going big with Google Play Games. Battle it out with Free Fire Max on a larger PC screen. Download and play today.
And orders her to wear the red dress, saying that she still hasn't learned anything. After 14 years in the basement, Sarah is pregnant once more. One day, Marie decides to wear makeup, and when Sarah sees the way Don is looking at her daughter, she tells him to stay away from her. Just to get back at her, Don turns off the power as he leaves.
Happy hour. Hello, how are you? Welcome, welcome. How's your day so far?
With no ventilation system, Marie struggles to breathe, so they have to stay near the vent. Feeling sad, Marie tells Sarah that she doesn't have any friends, and she's worried that she might not meet anyone, not even a nice boy. Sarah assures Marie that she will, and that she's working on it. Out of the blue, Marie asks Sarah how she met her dad. Sarah then confesses to Marie that she's known Marie's father almost her whole life, and Marie tells her to get a divorce once they get out of the basement. In her 17th year in captivity, Sarah gets pregnant once again. In their house, Irene tells Thomas how much she misses Sarah. Thomas wants to know what Sarah is like, and Irene tells him that his mother is magnificent. In the bomb shelter, Sarah takes advantage of the leaking water caused by the rain and tries to dig through the ceiling using a spoon. She's able to dig a hole deep enough to reach a sewer. She then flashes a light through it, and a man passing by sees it. Unfortunately, the man informs Don about the light, telling him that somebody is sending a signal to someone. Angry, Don goes down to the basement and beats Sarah, with Marie and her youngest son Michael watching. When Don leaves, Sarah bleeds and goes into labor. Sadly, the baby dies, leaving Don to take the body and bury it. On the 18th year, Marie and Michael get impatient and tell Don that they want to get out. Don, however, says that it depends on their mother if she learns to behave herself. Once Don is gone, Marie and Michael take their frustration out on their mother, blaming her for why they're still trapped there. Sarah tries to reason that she's just trying to protect them, but the two continue screaming, still demanding to go outside. By then, Sarah loses it, and she starts breaking their things while her children watch. The woman breaks down and lies on the floor, left with nothing but memories of better days with Chris and the life robbed from her by her own father. The kids feel guilty, so Michael and Marie clean up her mess, then apologize to her. Mumbling to herself, Sarah mentions Amy, and when the kids ask who Amy is, she admits that she hasn't been completely honest with them. She starts telling them her story, saying she used to live upstairs with her sister Amy. Sarah says she had a mom and a dad, but she didn't get along with her father. She continues her story, explaining how Don tricked her into getting into the basement before locking her in there. As Marie and Michael understand who Don really is, Marie starts to have an asthma attack. While Marie is having an episode, Michael asks Sarah what's wrong with them, and she firmly asserts that nothing's wrong with them, that it's always been Don who's at fault. Year 19 comes and Don comes to the basement with little supplies for Sarah and her kids. Sarah protests about how they're already rationing their supplies, but Don only insults her, making Michael angry. He yells at Don, demanding him not to talk to his mother that way, but Don taunts his son and mocks him about how there's nothing he can do. Without thinking, he attacks Don, but the boy barely even hurt him. When Sarah is finally able to control him, Don turns off the power and leaves. Life goes on for the Codys. Don gets fired from work, so he and
You want it in the bedroom? Okay. Do you want food in the bedroom? I didn't hear you.
I didn't hear you.
I didn't hear you. Okay. I'm coming. Oh. 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 Yes. It's so tight.
That's retraction.
Yeah. No.
And I hope you put something faster.
Yes, I did. But knowing you asked, I didn't put enough salt. I'm gonna add some salt now. Here, Pop.
Irene are beginning to argue frequently about money. Sarah tries her best to make her children happy in the cramped basement that's all they've ever known, while trying to find a way for them to get help. One night, Don attaches a tube from her car's exhaust to the vent leading to the basement. He closes the garage door and starts his car, making all the smoke go directly into the basement. As Don sits in his car, Thomas shows up and he's forced to turn the engine off. He then goes to the basement to check if Sarah and her kids are okay, and he's relieved to see that they are. During their 20th year of captivity, Sarah's daughter gets a severe asthma attack and can barely even breathe. When Don finally arrives, Sarah begs him to take them to the hospital. Don refuses at first, but Sarah is finally able to persuade him. They leave Michael in the basement, and in the hospital, the doctor tells Sarah and Don that Marie is in critical condition. While the doctor talks to Don about Marie's medical history, Sarah stays quiet, just staring at the clock the whole time. While Don is looking away, Sarah spills water on Marie's medical paper, forcing Don to leave to get another one. Sarah seizes the opportunity to ask for help from the doctor, finally leading to Don's arrest. When Marie wakes up, Sarah tells her that they're finally free. Back at home, the police are able to rescue Michael from the basement. The three siblings are finally reunited, and as Sarah, Amy, and Irene watch them from the porch, Chris suddenly shows up. Sarah and Chris catch up, and as they talk, out. Chris apologizes to her for believing Don's story and not looking for her. Sarah, however, tells him that she's never stopped thinking about him for 20 years. Chris gives Sarah a new helmet, which he was supposed to give to her the day he talked to Don. After 20 long years, the two of them finally go for a ride once more. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe and click the bell icon to get new.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Hey, what's up, guys? So nothing too crazy to talk about, but Samuel Jackson, and of course, a lot of the cast of the prequel trilogy have gone in an interview for the prequels, highlighting the 25 years of the prequel trilogy, which, in my opinion, is, I can't say the best, but, well, half of Star Wars, really. It's just my opinion. And they asked Samuel Jackson if he would like to make a Mace Windu show, of course. And obviously he's going to say yes. So he did, and the whole internet is buzzing now, and he said that he's not dead.
It was George Lucas' idea to kill Mace Windu. He said he killed all these important characters and all these other movies leading up to that, and said the only person left to kill that would mean anything in episode 3 would be me. I was trying to figure out, really? Can't you just like injure me and whatever? But in my mind, I'm not dead. Jedis can fall incredibly high distances and not die.
Whether or not Disney and Lucasfilm will respond to the call remains to be seen. However, the character's popularity has certainly not slowed down in recent years. Just last week, Marvel released a new comic series titled Mace Windu, focusing on the character before the Phantom Menace. We're going to get 2 books coming out, which are going to have Mace in it. One's going to be about Mace. One's called The Glass Abyss, which comes out August 6th, 2024. And the next one is going to be Star Wars The Living Force, which is 1 year before Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And that's also going to have Mace Windu in it. So I'm interested to see what they do with the stories, how they write it. You know, are they going to break anything in canon from what George made? Or are they going to go along and really, you know, extrapolate on it and make it nice, and evolve the story or add to it in some sort of positive way? But basically what I want to say is, of course, Samuel Jackson is down. And what I have to say about that is, when I told Nick Gillard about episode 2, he was like, man, Sam would love to play Mace Windu again. He has been talking about it. He wants to do it. And so this is something that's for sure 100% true, that Samuel Jackson isn't just saying, you know, right there on the spot. It's something he really wants to do. And with episode 2, I know it's, you know, not official, but believe me when I say that I think this will be exactly what many fans want to see, because it's something I want to see, in terms of Mace Windu coming back, full-fledged, full throttle, Charlie's Angels 2, you know, just powerful, very powerful, and in a desperate state where he is really the last Jedi. He is the last hope that can destroy Vader and destroy the Emperor and free all of the Jedi that have been captured by the Empire at this point from Order 66. And Vader Episode 2 is going to show that, and Vader Episode 3 is going to finish that. So we're going to see where the story goes and how the characters play out, and I couldn't be more excited to show you guys. And I'm sure that Samuel L. Jackson will see it. Nick Gillard,
thank you.
And we'll see what he thinks of it. So
Yeah.
if you want to support the project, all you got to do is just check the videos out here and there whenever you can. Throw a like on the video. It's free. That's all you got to do. And if you want to go above and beyond, you know, there's the merch coming out with a major merch line for 2024. You can super chat. You can become a member. And of course, if you want a saber, go to theorysabers.com. Tons of different ways to support, whether you got money or you don't. And of course, I hope that Disney does go ahead and make a Mace Windu show or movie. And I hope that they do it right and they don't destroy the character or ruin the character like they did with Boba Fett. Well, some others. Thanks so much for watching today's vid. See you in the next one. May the Force be with you. Always.
The show opens up as a monk and a nun in Andalusia, Spain, zip open a bag to reveal the dead body of a young girl. The monk asks if the nun believes the girl is in hell, and the nurse replies it wouldn't matter as the girl was already in hell. After a while, the monk asks for the deceased's name, age, and cause of death so that he can record it. The nun reports the girl's name is Ava Silva and her age is 19. However, she refuses to give a cause of death. Suddenly, the monk receives a text message and tells the nun that he must attend to urgent matters. As the nun leaves, 3 women dressed in all black and armed with machine guns approach the church. 2 of the women, Mary and Beatrice, carry their badly wounded leader, Shannon, and place her on a table. There are pieces of a substance called divinium inside her. According to the surgeon who arrives soon after, taking the pieces out could kill Shannon. The third woman, Lilith, insists there is a protocol for such situations. Although she doesn't say it out loud, she hints that they should allow their gravely wounded leader to die so that the focus can be shifted to the enemies who have followed them to the church. However, Mary is stubborn and refuses to give up on her friend. However, Shannon weakly grabs Mary's arm and tells her she will not make it. She then gives a medallion to Mary and instructs the surgeon to carry out the required procedure. In the meantime, explosions and gunfire continue in the distance as Beatrice reports that their enemies have broken through the first barricade. Alarmed, Lilith and the surgeon turn Shannon over while Mary comforts her dying friend. The surgeon pulls down Shannon's shirt to reveal a red, glowing circle called the Angle's Halo. Gathering her last breath, the leader tells Mary to keep it safe or all will be lost. She also ominously tells her close friend not to trust anyone. Next, the surgeon clamps a metallic device onto Shannon's back and removes the red-hot, glowing circle from her back. Awestruck, Mary tells Shannon that the halo is beautiful, only to find that she has died. Following this, the surgeon asks if Mary is the next bearer of the halo, but Mary says no and mentions Lilith before the door explodes. The surgeon carrying the halo tries to run out of the room with attackers shooting at her. As she runs, she trips and drops the halo, and an attacker tries to pick it up with his bare hands. The mystical artifact burns through the man's fingers, falling back on the floor as he screams in pain. Taking advantage, the surgeon uses the device to pick the halo back up and continues running, entering the room with Ava's body. She asks for Ava's forgiveness before inserting the halo into her back. As soon as she does so, the scarred flesh heals instantly after the halo enters the dead body. Meanwhile, an attacker sneaks up on the surgeon, and she beats him with her device. On the other hand, Ava's body begins to shake and convulse. Flashbacks of a different woman and Ava's time in the orphanage play, and she opens her eyes and screams. Through blurry vision, Ava can see the surgeon and her attacker fighting. She briefly checks over her limbs before looking over at the fight again, just in time to see the attacker kill the surgeon. As she stands up on shaky legs, she sees a red cloud standing above the attacker. Just as he walks towards her, she picks up the device and hits the man. The man explodes into tiny pieces, and the red cloud screams and disappears. Following this, Ava exits the building while reflecting on what just happened. She walks through the streets, wondering if she has gone insane and if all of this is just a big hallucination. When a group of men approaches her, she backs up into the road, feeling nauseous. Suddenly, a bus hits her, sending the young girl flying towards the walls of a building. Ava seemingly passes through the walls, landing inside a football merchandise store. Dazed, she sits up and sees a massive gash in her leg healing right before her eyes. She then realizes she is in a clothing store and changes into a football team's merchandise. Back at the church, Mary and her group survive the battle. Their commanding officer, Father Vincent, arrives to check on the team. After a brief scan of the area, Mary and Beatrice tell him what happened in their operation. They were going to retrieve something but unexpectedly met more resistance than they had hoped. Following this surprising news, Father Vincent goes to the other room where Ava's body was placed before the attack. A resident priest of the church explains that the surgeon put the angel's halo inside the dead body of a girl named Ava, which then came back to life. This is completely new information for Father Vincent, but he notes that this turn of events may not be completely random. Meanwhile, Ava approaches her old orphanage, sneaks in, and heads to the old room she used to share with her roommate, Diego. Diego mistakes her for an angel before realizing who it is and exclaims joyfully that she is walking. However, he is confused that she's here as Ava had died the day before. Confused, Ava reveals that she has superpowers. Outside, Father Vincent walks with a nun towards Ava's old room.
I'm not hungry yet. Yeah. I will eat soon. Maybe in half an hour.
Room, saying he is following up on an inquiry. He also asks for any information about her friends or other places she visited, but the nun tells him that Ava never left the building as she was a quadriplegic. Stunned, Father Vincent and the nun enter the room just to see Diego closing the blinds. The child lies by saying that he was simply looking at a bird. Outside the room, Father Vincent asks the nun how Ava got into the orphanage. The nun replies that she came there at 7 years old, already a quadriplegic. Ava's father was unknown, and no other family could be found, while her mother was killed in the same accident that caused her disability. Next, Father Vincent states that he has one more question, and asks the nun how the young girl died. The scene shifts to the following day as Ava stands in the sun by the beach, remarking that she is exhausted, but she cannot go to sleep. Spotting a pool, she heads over, believing that cold water would wake her up.
Did you know that people shop across Google more than 1 billion times a day?
However, just as she jumps into the pool, she realizes she cannot swim and begins to drown. Fortunately, a random boy jumps into the pool and helps her towards the shallow end. He introduces himself as JC, and Ava replies that she is hungry before revealing her real name. Following this, JC gets Ava some food, which she very enthusiastically eats. Meanwhile, 3 individuals enter the gates of the residence, where the pool is, and approach the duo. JC introduces them as his friends, Chanel, Zori, and Randall. All 3 of them view Ava with suspicion. Meanwhile, Mary reports back to Father Vincent at their secret headquarters, a convent. She brings him photos of Ava from the security cameras of the church. After examining the images, Father Vincent asks Mary to distribute them to all the churches in Andalusia so that they can locate the young girl quickly. On the other hand, Mary wants answers to their failed mission earlier. In response, Vincent says he doesn't know who they're up against or how they knew the method to kill a warrior nun like Shannon. He then entrusts Mary to find Ava because both Lilith and Beatrice are flawed by personal gain from such a mission. He knows that they need to retrieve the halo before their enemies can at whatever price necessary. Elsewhere, JC asks Ava to walk by the beach so they can talk in private. He comes clean to her and reveals that they're opportunists. They know the actual owner of the mansion stays in Saudi Arabia, so they use the mansion and just get it cleaned before the owner gets back. Puzzled but excited, Ava asks him if she could tag along with them, and JC gladly agrees. That night, Ava attends her first rave party with her new friends. She finds it spectacular and even indulges herself in JC's party drugs. Back at the convent, Mary continues to mourn the loss of Shannon. She reminisces about the time when Shannon confessed her love for Mary. Although she didn't realize it at the time, she regrets not telling Shannon her true feelings as well. On the other hand, Ava again sees the mysterious red smoke at the rave party and decides to follow it. She sees the smoke take the form of some kind of demon, feasting on the souls of the 2 unconscious people, probably dead due to drug overdose. Frightened, she runs back to JC, and they leave the party immediately, so Ava would feel safe. While this is happening, Father Vincent goes to a bar to take his mind off things. There, a bartender offers to listen to his problems. As the priest opens up about the existence of evil creatures, we see a scene from the church where Ava's dead body was taken. A demon is looking for the angel's halo that was supposed to be on the back of Shannon's dead body. The beast kills the priest and slashes the back of the corpse, searching for the magical artifact. But it is too late, as the halo is safe inside Ava's body. In the next scene, Mary returns to their base convent after examining the docks of Malaga. She wants to focus on the mercenaries who killed Shannon. However, Lilith focuses on retrieving Halo, causing heavy arguments between the two. Father Vincent intervenes in the back and forth trash talking, and tells the girls to follow him to the church. Upon their arrival, they see Shannon's dead body desecrated by the demon. Horrified, Vincent tells everyone they have a new enemy, a Tarrasque. Unlike other demons named Wraiths, Tarrasques are beasts of hell that can inflict physical damage. After this short visit, Beatrice starts researching the Tarrasque at their base convent. Based on the ancient texts, these demons can only appear in the real world briefly. However, they have a history of always being able to track down the Halo Bearer. She also finds that only the Halo Bearer armed with a Divinium sword can kill the Tarrasque. Alarmed, the warrior nun asks Vincent what would happen if the beast gets its hand on the halo. Suddenly, the Cardinal of the Catholic Church, Francesco Duretti, answers the question for Beatrice: heaven will fall while hell rises. After Beatrice leaves the room, the Cardinal warns Vincent that he has until the next day to give the halo to Lilith, or he may lose his job. That night, Ava and her new group of friends head over to ArcTech, a company which manufactures innovative cybernetics and technology for a prestigious hi-fi party. Ava loses her mind with excitement as they enter the company's premises. She read an article about the head of innovations at ArcTech, Dr. Jillian Salvius, reporting that she helps people move stuff using their minds. As JC and Ava enter the main hall, she immediately sees Cardinal Duretti. Duretti also sees her, but he doesn't seem to be aware that she's the current holder of the halo. However, his ring glows a bright blue hue. It appears to be reacting when near the halo bearer. On the other hand, the Cardinal meets Christian, Dr. Salvius' assistant, who used to be a Vatican archivist. Christian chose to follow the path of science after spending 30 years with the Catholic Church. Out of everyone's sight, JC and Ava make their way into the labs of ArcTech. While they're inside the experimental area, Dr. Salvius hosts a presentation outside. At the same time, Mary arrives at ArcTech just as JC lets the rest of their group inside the labs. Meanwhile, Dr. Salvius addresses the crowd and reveals she can stabilize the Higgs field for a full minute. At the sight of the machine, Cardinal Duretti immediately knows it's made up of divinium, a metal which has been a highly guarded secret of the church for centuries. On the stage, Dr. Salvius powers up her device and unveils the world's first quantum portal, a device that allows humans to transport between dimensions instantly. After the presentation, Dr. Salvius confronts Cardinal Duretti on where he stands on quantum portals. However, he replies the mysterious metal must be returned to the church to safeguard it from people who want to use it for personal gain. At the convent, Camilla and Beatrice track Ava down using the National Police facial recognition system. They got a hit on a CCTV camera, so they traced her location and followed her. Father Vincent doesn't want to give the halo to Lilith as he thinks Ava has been chosen to become the new halo bearer. Back at ArcTech, a man confronts Christian while Mary eavesdrops on their conversation. He tells Christian that he lost many of his men during their failed mission the other night. However, the assistant calls for security to escort the man out before he confronts Dr. Salvius. Meanwhile, one of Ava's new friends, Randall, informs JC that Dr. Salvius has entered the lab. JC sees the message and quickly leaves with the new girl. While leaving, Ava sees a kid being held inside one of the lab rooms. Suddenly, she gets a hunch that the kid may be connected to her past. Leaving JC locked out of the door, she returns to the room only to find that the kid is already gone. Determined, she tries to get inside the room, but the alarms go off when she opens the door. The guards immediately chase after Ava and eventually corner her. At the exact moment, a ghostly figure appears behind, out of the wall, which scares the guards away. Ava turns around to look at the ghostly figure, the Tarrasque. Terrified, she screams as she runs and hides inside a lab room. Fortunately, Father Vincent and the warrior sisters arrive and shoot the Tarrasque, but their bullets barely even disturb the beast. Suddenly, Ava grabs the divinium shield she saw earlier and hits the demon, pushing it back to hell. Following this, the young girl tries to leave the building immediately, but Beatrice tranquilizes her. They then tie her up and take Ava with them back to their base. When Ava wakes up in the convent, Lilith and Beatrice talk about her. She is confused and frightened, and the halo reacts to her emotions. It causes Ava to levitate even while cuffed to the bed, and in a blink of an eye, frees her. Alarmed, Beatrice tells the bearer to calm down, but a large blast sets off from Ava as a defensive mechanism. The shockwave sends Lilith and Beatrice flying and knocks the clueless girl unconscious. Later, Father Vincent comforts the now conscious Ava by telling her the story of a legendary female warrior, Ariela of Cordoba. Ariela was orphaned at a very young age and didn't have any purpose until she found God. After that, the warrior decided to fight for God until she was killed in battle one day. However, an angel named Adriel came down from the heavens and gave his halo to save her. This incident started their group, the Order of the Cruciform Sword. Father Vincent then reveals that they are a group of devout women tasked with keeping the ancient evil at bay. Furthermore, whoever bears the halo is the chosen champion of God, the warrior nun. Despite this information, the young girl says she is not ready for any commitment, but Father Vincent prohibits her from leaving the monastery and pushes her to train with other sisters. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of ArcTech, Dr. Salvius and Kristen see the security footage of the divinium shield reacting to Ava the moment she entered the lab. They now plan to search for the mysterious girl in the footage. On the other hand, Father Vincent tells the Cardinal that Ava is currently undergoing training within the Order. Cardinal Duretti gives Father Vincent one chance for both him and Ava. If they fail, Lilith gets the halo, which may kill Ava. Later that afternoon, Lilith arrives to engage Ava in a sparring session under the watchful eyes of the head of combats, Mother Superior. After a few initial hits, the hits just go through Ava, making her upper body impervious to physical attacks. This, along with Ava's free spirit attitude, pisses Lilith off. As a result, she snaps and tries to hit Ava in the face, but Mother Superior stops her. In the following scene, Father Vincent continues Ava's training by making her read the history of the Order. For Vincent, God gave Ava a second chance at life, and it was her choice to either take it or not. Elsewhere, JC and his friends find a new place to crash. They enter a beach house only to be greeted by Dr. Salvius and her men. Alarmed, the youngsters try to run, but the guards have already surrounded them. Salvius then tells them she's looking for their friend. Overcome by the moment's pressure, one of the girls accidentally slips out Ava's name. However, JC tells the doctor that Ava isn't part of their group and they just met her a few days ago. Surprisingly, Salvius lets them off the hook, but she gives them her number and tells them to call her when Ava contacts them. Back at the convent, Ava goes to see Lilith for weapons training. There, she sees a divinium sword for the first time. The mystical sword starts to glow as soon as she enters the room. Without wasting further time, Lilith takes the sword and slits Ava's right bicep. She reminds the new girl that not even the warrior nun is immune to divinium. All of a sudden, they hear a demon growling in the distance. Alarmed, Lilith throws the sword towards Ava, but the new girl panics. She then runs as fast as she can towards the wall, passing through it, instead of appearing entirely on the other side. Her leg gets stuck inside the wall. At the same time, Lilith arrives in the room, where Mother Superior is also observing Ava. It is revealed that there was no demon attack in reality, and this was simply a test. Disappointed, Mother Superior announces Ava isn't cut out to be a warrior nun. She scolds her, revealing that Ava killed herself before being resurrected. Disregarding the new girl's feelings, the head of combats points out that Ava knew she wouldn't survive the real world, so she decided to kill herself. This relentless personal attack breaks Ava down as she begins to sob. Luckily, Father Vincent arrives to stop their argument. That night, Ava tells Beatrice she didn't kill herself. When asked if she remembers anything about the night, she recalls it was just like any other night. She was watching television, and then she fell asleep. On the other hand, Beatrice tells Ava about her past, how her parents were politicians.
Welcome to Movie Recall. In today's video, we'll be going through the 2012 horror thriller film Truth or Die. It's time to recall. Let's get started. Turn on subtitles and spoilers ahead. College students enjoy a raging Halloween party where four friends, Paul, Chris, Gemma, and Eleanor, toast to the end of their term. Paul also opens up about a wonderful internship he's landed, but his girlfriend Eleanor becomes upset at the possibility of a long-distance relationship. Luke approaches and offers Chris and Paul some drugs, and although Paul refuses at first, he ends up taking several hits. As the party continues, Felix, a meek boy, intently watches Gemma from a distance. Noticing his vulnerability, Luke comes up to him and persuades him to make a move on Gemma. But because Gemma is dating Chris, the two men know what the result will be if Felix tries to ask her out. So Luke gives Felix some drugs to boost his confidence. Felix then walks up to Gemma and asks her out, but she politely turns him down. However, she still cheers him on, saying that he'll find someone who will like him for who he is. Meanwhile, Paul and Eleanor go upstairs to make love, but before they can go any further, Paul passes out from intoxication. Ejected, Eleanor goes downstairs to start a game of Truth or Dare instead. The bottle spins and points at Felix, who picks Truth. Eleanor then asks him who among the people in the room he'd want to spend the night with, and when he picks Gemma, Chris immediately gets mad and starts taunting him. Eleanor tells Chris that they're just joking around, but he refuses to listen. Felix tries to explain that he's just playing the game, but Chris only gets angrier and even grabs his manhood. Then when Felix manages to push him back, Chris gets up and punches him. Gemma scolds Chris, but he shows no remorse. A few months later, the same group of friends gets invited to Felix's birthday party, learning that he comes from a wealthy and prominent family. Chris drives up to the mansion with Luke, still resenting Felix, blaming him for his breakup with Gemma. On the other hand, Gemma joins Eleanor and Paul, who are also having relationship troubles. It's been a couple of days since Paul got back from his internship, but he still hasn't slept with Eleanor yet, so she feels insecure, thinking that Paul might have lost interest in her already. Moments later, they arrive at the grandiose but seemingly abandoned mansion. Then a groundskeeper, Woodbridge, greets them and says that the house is closed, but he still directs them to where the supposed party is taking place. It is a cabin in the woods about a half a mile away from the mansion, and they have to go there on foot. When they come across a puddle, Eleanor orders Paul to carry her across because she's worried about her expensive shoes. Meanwhile, Chris takes his chance and offers to carry Gemma too, trying to reconnect with her. When they reach the cabin, Felix's brother Justin greets them. He apologizes for the mix-up, telling them that Felix hasn't returned from Chile yet, where he's volunteering on a hospital project. As it turns out, the birthday bash was meant to be a surprise, but because Felix's flight got canceled, Justin put off the party. However, he forgot to notify their group. After apologizing, Justin offers some food and drinks and urges them to just have a party of their own. Meanwhile, Paul has already started drinking a bottle of beer. Justin opens a bottle of champagne for the group, successfully convincing them to stay. He sits with the other guys, revealing that he's in the army and has served 3 tours in Afghanistan. They continue making small talk until Justin observes Chris and Gemma's relationship, mentioning that she's Felix's type. Chris laughs at the comment, making Justin ask whether he thinks Gemma is too good for his brother. Justin's face also becomes unreadable as Chris mentions how Felix tried to make a move on Gemma during their Halloween party. Then when Luke comes over to offer some nitrous, Justin excuses himself and joins the two women. Eleanor and Gemma show interest in Justin because of his looks, so they both happily converse with him, even going as far as saying that they're very close friends of Felix. Eleanor even touches Justin's muscles and forces Gemma to do the same. However, she pulls on Gemma a little too hard and ends up making her spill her champagne on Justin. They apologize profusely, but Justin brushes it off. But Eleanor has planned the whole thing so that Gemma could make a move on Justin, following him as he goes to change. They subtly flirt with each other until Luke interrupts them, saying that they will use the balloons as drugs. However, Justin states that he has a better idea. They all sit in a circle to play Truth or Dare, and the bottle first points at Eleanor. Chris dares her to make out with Gemma, so the two women kiss. Paul then jokes about making out with Chris, but Justin quickly dismisses the idea. When they spin the bottle again, it points at Gemma. Chris asks if she'll take him back, but she simply says she won't. Then Justin spins the bottle and deliberately points it at himself, saying he's choosing truth. Justin confesses that Felix isn't in Chile, but he actually hanged himself in that cabin. At first, some of them laugh in discomfort, not knowing how to react, but Justin makes it clear that he's not joking. Justin then recounts that he was in Afghanistan, and when he came back, Felix had already hanged himself, and Woodbridge cut him down. Because of their family background, they decided to keep the incident a secret, although it's already brought shame to their name. Meanwhile, Justin doesn't hesitate to throw out homophobic slurs. When Paul asks why they're there, Justin straightforwardly tells them that he wants to know what made Felix do it. The group realizes that they've been set up, and they're also unaware that Justin has a gun.
Tide is busting laundry's biggest myth.
That cold water can't clean.
Cold water on those stains?
Cold water can't clean tough stains?
I'd say that myth is busted. Turn to cold,